What's up, everybody? Today we're deep diving Outlaw Rogue, more specifically the Keep It Rolling build. Outlaw is a very fast-paced spec that can feel very satisfying to play, and today we're covering stats, gear, talents, and rotation. So without further ado, let's jump right into it with Stat Prio. As an Outlaw Rogue, especially with the Keep It Rolling build, hitting the right amount of haste is critical. Haste takes priority over all other stats until you reach a target threshold, ideally between 18 and 20%. While 20% is the sweet spot, 18% can work effectively. Now, why is haste so important? In the War Within, Adrenaline Rush was reworked and now scales your global cooldown reduction based on your haste, rather than providing a flat reduction like it did in Dragonflight. At 25% haste, you reach maximum GCD reduction, bringing it down to 0.8 seconds. However, you do not need to hit 25%. Keep It Rolling feels really good right at that 20% mark. If you're just shy of the haste threshold, consider using a haste flask, which provides an additional 4% haste. This can help you hit that 20% sweet spot for faster GCDs and smoother gameplay. With that in mind, here's how your stat priorities should look. Number 1 is haste until you are in that threshold. Then it's versatility and critical strike, which are both about equal. And then once you're capped on that haste, it drops down behind versatility and crit and becomes equal with mastery. Now, these are strong guidelines, but remember, it's always best to sim yourself. Now let's talk about gear. As always, remember to sim yourself. I cannot emphasize this enough. This is crucial for optimizing performance. While best in slot lists are great to give you an idea of what to aim for, they are built as a full set. Missing pieces from that set might mean a particular item from that set isn't the best for you at this moment. So make sure you're simming anytime you're replacing gear to make sure you're not falling out of your haste threshold and making sure that it is a good replacement piece. Now for tier. Our tier set is quite solid, especially after the recent buffs, providing about 4% haste increase with the 4-piece set. For which pieces you should use, aim for head, shoulders, chest, and gloves as your tier slots. The legs have mastery, which is pretty weak for Outlaw, so they are better off as a crafted piece. There are a couple of dungeon legs that have crit and haste, but if you've already hit your haste cap, then a crafted piece with crit and verse will serve you better. When it comes to trinkets, the raid options are BIS, but they aren't head and shoulders above the rest. Mad Queen's Mandate is the first one, fantastic for single target, but it does have a cast time that will break stealth, so remember that. Void Reaper's Contract provides great agility, great for AOE, and is a solid overall choice with or without the set bonus. Next, we've got Sikrin's Endless Arsenal. It offers some defensive abilities, but its on-use damage is quite strong. It rotates between 3 different effects: a single target attack, a line attack, and Barrage, which is an uncapped AoE attack and great for packs. The rotation can be tricky to time, but all 3 effects are worth using on cooldown regardless of scenario. Now for some trinkets from dungeons. Sack Brood from Arakara is a very strong trinket. I think we're all well aware of that at this point. Everyone seems to need it. Bottle Flayed Wind Toxin from Necrotic Wake is excellent for single target, but a little weaker in AoE. Deadeye Spyglass from Siege of Borealis is the opposite, being better in AoE and a bit weaker in the single target. Overclocked Gira Ring Launcher from Stone Vault requires some finesse but performs well. And lastly is Scroll of Momentum from Delves is surprisingly effective. Even the green version can be an upgrade if your current trinkets aren't great. It scales with movement speed, and using sprint during its window gives a nice damage boost. I was using a 610 trinket and the 593 scroll was a big upgrade, so it's worth mentioning. The reason you see it low on most lists is because it cannot be mythic tracked, so eventually it'll just be beaten by higher eye level trinkets. For embellishments, we're going with 2 dust thread linings, which give versatility when above 80% health. Outlaw tends to have solid uptime on this, being a little tankier than most DPS. If you're looking for a more single target embellishment, elemental focusing lenses are good, just a note that it will not work if you do not have a gem socketed. If you're crafting a weapon and want an embellishment there, Symbiosis and Blessed Weapon Grip are okay. Dust Thread Lining remains a preferred choice, but that being said, embellishments in the War Within aren't too impactful, doing about less than 1% of our overall DPS, so don't stress it too much. Now let's quickly go over some talents. I won't go through every one since this video is already going to be long, but here are your single target and Mythic Plus talent builds. The only difference is taking deft maneuvers over heavy hitters in Mythic Plus, which is nice because you don't sacrifice much single target damage while gaining AoE benefits. Now I do want to go into some key talents that impact and kind of create your rotation. Underhanded Upper Hand. This talent allows Blade Flurry to maintain its duration during Adrenaline Rush and prevents Adrenaline Rush from losing duration while stealth. This is heavily utilized to extend the uptime of Adrenaline Rush. Next, we've got Ace Up Your Sleeve. This talent gives Between the Eyes a 5% chance per combo point spent on it to grant an additional 5 combo points. This means spending all of your combo points at max gives you about a 35% chance to regain 5 combo points. This interaction is a crucial part of the Outlaw's feedback loop, allowing for continuous damage output. It's also worth noting Ruthlessness, the talent, gives you a 20% chance per combo point to refund 1 combo point. So whenever Ace Up Your Sleeve refunds the 5 combo points, if you're using at least 5, you get 6 back. Crack Shot. With this talent, Between the Eyes has no cooldown and also triggers a dispatch at the target for 50% damage when cast from stealth. This is another key factor in maintaining the Outlaw Rogue's feedback loop, enhancing both damage and resource generation, because every time you're Between the Eyesing and it's triggering a dispatch, you're also giving Count the Odds a chance to proc you a Roll the Bones buff. So you get a little bit of everything from Crack Shot. For AoE situations, Deft Maneuvers allows the initial damage from Blade Flurry to generate combo points for each enemy hit. This is extremely beneficial in AoE scenarios due to the low energy cost of Blade Flurry, making it easier to maintain a high combo point generation. And lastly, we have our hero tree Fatebound. While this talent tree is mostly passive, there is an important interaction to keep in mind when pulling, which we'll discuss in the rotation section next. Alright, let's get into rotation. Outlaw is pretty fast paced with some of the highest APMs across all specs. There are procs going off, you're dealing with various buff, and no pull feels the same, which to me is part of the fun of Outlaw. But before we dive into core gameplay, let's talk about everyone's favorite ability, Roll the Bones. Roll the Bones is much simpler than it has been, with only a few rules to follow. Roll if you have 0 buffs, and roll if you have 1 buff and Loaded Dice active. Loaded Dice is a buff you get from casting Adrenaline Rush that guarantees your next roll will give you 2 buffs. So again, 0 buffs, you obviously need to roll to get some, and if you have 1 buff, but Loaded Dice is active and you can guarantee getting 2, then you re-roll. It doesn't matter if the buffs are from previous rolls or Count the Odds, you treat them the same. Simple. Keep It Rolling is simple as well. Cast as soon as you have 4 buffs. As soon as 4 buffs hit, you're casting Keep It Rolling. The only additional rule is if you have Loaded Dice active, you are going to cast Roll the Bones again after you casted Keep It Rolling. This is because Keep It Rolling locks in your buffs and will not re-roll them with the next Roll the Bones cast, meaning if your next roll rolls buffs you don't have locked in with KiR, they will be added instead of replacing your current ones. If you roll buffs you already have, they will be refreshed to 39 seconds. So ideally you want to roll after your locked in buffs from Keep It Rolling, have less than 39 seconds on them so you don't lose any duration on your freshly extended buffs. So quick recap on Roll the Bones and Keep It Rolling. Roll the Bones. You're rolling if you have 0 buffs, and you're rolling if you have 1 buff and Loaded Dice is active. Keep It Rolling. Keep It Rolling as soon as you have 4 buffs. Roll the Bones after Keep It Rolling if you have Loaded Dice active and your current buffs are less than 39 seconds. Again, it's much simpler now than it's ever been. If you played it back in the day, there was a ton of different rules to follow. It has been simplified dramatically. Let's talk gameplay. Before the pull, you're going to want to get into stealth, Adrenaline Rush, and Roll the Bones. Now, before the War Within, you would also cast Slice and Dice in your pre-pull, but with the Fatebound hero talents, there is a talent called Edge Case that after you cast Adrenaline Rush, your next finisher, which would be Slice and Dice in this case, flips a coin that lands on its side, granting you the effects of heads and tails. Heads gives you a 10% damage increase, which is fine, but tails deals a blast of cosmic damage. So if you're targeting the boss and cast Slice and Dice after Adrenaline Rush, it's going to hit that boss with that cosmic damage and pull him early. If you don't target the boss and cast Slice and Dice, you lose out on that damage. And for some reason, the 10% buff you get from the head side of the coin disappears as soon as you pull the boss, so you lose out on both effects. So what you want to do is cast Slice and Dice as soon as the boss is pulled rather than right before. You will see that you go from max combo points to 2 as soon as the boss is pulled, and then you're going to Slice and Dice on those 2 combo points, it's fine. With the Cut to the Chase talent that we now have baseline, you're going to be popping a finisher and refreshing your Slice and Dice to its max duration, so don't worry about losing out on the 4 combo points worth of time on your initial Slice and Dice. It will be refreshed before it runs out. Now, there isn't a set rotation for Outlaw because of how dynamic it is, but there are a few damaging abilities you always want to send on cooldown, and that's Echoing Reprimand and Ghostly Strike. Ghostly Strike is off the GCD and can be macroed into every builder and work fine. You can set it and forget it. I personally have it macroed to Echoing Reprimand and Sinister Strike. Reason being is as soon as the pull starts, I cast my Slice and Dice and then Echoing Reprimand, which will also cast Ghostly Strike, so I'm able to get both of those abilities on cooldown ASAP, and then Ghostly Strike being macroed to Sinister Strike will make sure it's used on CD every time it's available throughout the whole fight. Now let's dive into the core gameplay. Outlaw Rogues thrive on proc-based abilities in the interactions with Roll the Bones buffs, so there isn't a strict rotation to follow. Every pull is different, every sequence of abilities change, and the key to mastering the spec is understanding a few important rules. Instead of a rigid priority list, it's better to grasp how the spec is meant to flow. The essence of Outlaw Rogue revolves around 4 key talents and abilities. The first is Restless Blades. Your finishing moves reduce the cooldown of your abilities by 1 second per combo point spent. This means the more finishers you're firing off, the faster your key abilities are coming off cooldown and the better your uptime is. Next is Underhanded Upper Hand, which allows Blade Flurry to maintain its duration during Adrenaline Rush and stops Adrenaline Rush from losing duration while in stealth. This also means while you're in the Subterfuge window. This talent shines in both single target and AoE scenarios and plays a major role in your gameplay loop. Now for the bread and butter of Outlaw, Ace Up Your Sleeve and Crack Shot. Ace Up Your Sleeve gives Between the Eyes a 5% chance per combo point spent to refund 5 combo points. Meanwhile, Crack Shot removes the cooldown of Between the Eyes when cast from stealth and also triggers the dispatch at 50% damage. So Ace gives you the chance for 5 free combo points, and Crack Shot ensures that Between the Eyes can be spammed with no cooldown during stealth. This is where the gameplay loop comes together. Your goal is to maximize uptime on Adrenaline Rush to keep your energy regeneration high and your GCD shortened. With Underhanded Upper Hand, you can pause the duration of Adrenaline Rush while in stealth or Subterfuge, which lasts for 6 seconds after leaving stealth. This makes being in stealth as often as possible critical to keeping Adrenaline Rush going. You can do this by vanishing strategically during your Adrenaline Rush windows. Without a Trace talented, you have 2 Vanish charges, giving you an extra 12 seconds of Adrenaline Rush uptime. Plus the 6 seconds from Subterfuge at the start, you can have your first Adrenaline Rush last 38 seconds instead of 20. And then, every time you vanish in combat, you extend it by another 6 seconds. So what do you do after you vanish? Once you vanish, your focus shifts to Crack Shot and Ace Up Your Sleeve. With Crack Shot, Between the Eyes has no cooldown during stealth, and with Ace, each cast of Between the Eyes has a chance to refund 5 combo points. So you want to vanish at 6+ combo points with Adrenaline Rush active, freezing the Adrenaline Rush timer. Then you cast Between the Eyes, which also casts Dispatch, triggering Count the Odds for potential Roll the Bones buffs. And then if Ace Up Your Sleeve procs, it refunds 5 combo points, bringing you to 6 combo points due to the Ruthlessness talent. If the proc happens, you immediately cast Between the Eyes again. If it doesn't, you use your builders such as Pistol Shot procs, Echoing Reprimand, Sinister Strike, or Ghostly Strike to get back to 5 or more combo points as quickly as possible without overcapping. Avoid using a big Pistol Shot proc if you're at 4 combo points or more, as you may need it in the next round if the refund doesn't happen. The shortened GCDs from Adrenaline Rush will help you build these combo points faster. Once you're at 5+ combo points, cast Between the Eyes again and repeat this process within the Subterfuge window. During your Vanish window, your goal is to cast as many Between the Eyes as possible. In some cases, you can chain several Between the Eyes back to back for the full 6 seconds, and other times you might only get 1 or 2 depending on RNG. This is the core loop of the spec. Vanish during Adrenaline Rush with 6 or more combo points, and use that window to pump out as many Between the Eyes casts as possible, building up points and chaining finishers. The rapid casting of Between the Eyes not only deals damage, but grants 6 seconds of CDR per cast, accelerating the return of your key abilities like Vanish and Adrenaline Rush, and minimizing the downtime between your cooldowns. As I mentioned before, each Between the Eyes cast also triggers Dispatch, which can give you additional Roll the Bones buffs from Count the Odds, helping you reach your Keep It Rolling window of 4 buffs, and if you're already in that window, it can also provide buffs that you don't have. Meanwhile, your finishing moves are also triggering the effects of your hero tree, flipping the coin for additional buffs or cosmic damage. All of these elements work in harmony, but they also make Outlaw very punishing if you make mistakes. Downtime is the enemy of the spec. The less time you spend in stealth or without Adrenaline Rush active, the worse Outlaw feels. The key to success is keeping those windows tight and making sure you're capitalizing on every opportunity to keep the machine running smoothly. I realized after recording while I was editing that I didn't have any footage of the actual gameplay, and it can sound a bit confusing. So here's what the rotation looks like from pre-pull to the start of the pull, and you see some downtime when I don't have Adrenaline Rush or Vanish. So this is what the gameplay loop looks like. Now let's talk about some common mistakes. Using Vanish without Adrenaline Rush. Some players get impatient and pop Vanish, hoping to get a few lucky refunds for some extra damage. Don't do this. Without Adrenaline Rush, your GCDs are longer, your energy regen is slower, and it's that much harder to build 5 combo points for Between the Eyes. Even if you get lucky with refunds, you won't be able to fit in as many casts as you would if Adrenaline Rush was active. Another mistake is trying to squeeze one more Between the Eyes as the subterfuge window is closing. If you miss it and cast it outside of stealth, you'll put Between the Eyes on cooldown, which is fine if Vanish has 45 seconds or more left on cooldown, but it's a big issue if your next Vanish is ready to go. You'll be stuck waiting for Between the Eyes to come off cooldown, losing uptime on Adrenaline Rush, losing damage from Crackshot, losing CDR from Crackshot, and potential buffs from Count the Odds. If it's close, I usually just dispatch. I'd rather miss my very last Between the Eyes but be able to chain Vanishes back to back than have to wait 10 to 15 seconds to go into my second Vanish. Now, I did just mention that it's fine to Between the Eyes if Vanish has 45 seconds or more left on cooldown, and that's because the cooldown of Between the Eyes is shorter than that, so it'll always be up in time for your next Vanish window. Additionally, Additionally, if Adrenaline Rush has 45 seconds or more left and you don't have it currently up, you can send it between the eyes outside of stealth, because you won't vanish until Adrenaline Rush is ready again, and between the eyes will be off cooldown. Lastly, don't vanish before your previous subterfuge window is up. If your chaining vanishes back to back, wait until subterfuge is fully finished from the first one, because if you vanish too early and cast between the eyes during the remaining subterfuge of the previous one, sometimes between the eyes can go on cooldown, and then you lose it for the entire vanish window, and you really don't want to do that. Earlier I mentioned that the Outlaw single target and AOE rotations are quite similar, so I want to touch on that right now. The difference is, in AOE, Blade Flurry becomes a top priority when you have 2 or more targets, and if you're talented into def maneuvers, which causes the initial damage from Blade Flurry to generate combo points, it becomes your go-to builder even if it's already active. When you have 3 or more targets and Blade Flurry is off cooldown, you're casting it for the combo point generation. It generates a combo point for each target hit, so on pulls where you have 4 or 5 mobs, you can cast it at 1 or 2 combo points and quickly jump to max. Make sure to take full advantage of this, especially in your subterfuge window, since Blade Flurry only costs 15 energy. It's an excellent low cost way to generate combo points. It can really help sneak in another between the eyes in your subterfuge window. And that's the basics of playing Outlaw. While it may seem a lot to juggle at first, once you get the rhythm down and understand the core mechanics, it becomes much more manageable. Just keep in mind, again, you need around 20% haste for Keep It Rolling to run smoothly. If you're below that threshold, you may want to look into Hidden Opportunity until you hit that mark. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer all of them. Until next time, guys.